Seltzer Kings.
Podcasts.
So, you just started using LinkedIn Premium. Now what? Well, on your premium company page, you noticed around 7.5 times more page engagement and 5 times more page views. Well done. And now, new clients are messaging you. All because you're using LinkedIn Premium, which helps you get the business growth you want. Think big, small business. Think big. Start your free trial at linkedin.com/premium small business. That's linkedin.com/premium small business.
Well, I don't know, Gavin. I guess it would be some sort of puffed pastry or something. I don't know what you people eat.
Yes. The following podcast contains...
You cannot say filth, flying filth in front of people.
explicit language.
Hello and welcome to the podcast that asks a simple question. When your best defense at your criminal trial is that you were hangry, what the hell were you thinking? I'm your host, Dave Bledsoe, and this is episode number 447. Tell him about the Twinkie edition of the show, where we talk about the importance of a snack cake in American jurisprudence. Stay tuned. What the Hell You Think podcast is brought to you by Low Rent Legal, because good lawyers are expensive, bad lawyers are cheap, and still technically lawyers. If you find yourself needing legal representation on a small budget, you have two choices. Find a lawyer to take your case pro bono or call Low Rent Legal. Each one of our legal team has attended and graduated a law school. Admittedly, not the best law schools, and their grades weren't great. But hey, C's still get degrees. On top of them, most of them have passed the bar exam. Admittedly, it took them more times than usual, but still, they passed. All their trouble means savings for you at Low Rent Legal. You get what you pay for, but that's still probably better than no lawyer at all. Probably.
I'm worried, Ray. It's getting crowded in there, and all my recent data points to something big on the horizon.
What do you mean, the big?
Well, let's say this Twinkie represents the normal amount of psychokinetic energy in the New York area. According to this morning's sample, it would be a Twinkie 35 feet long, weighing approximately 600 pounds.
That's a big Twinkie.
We could be on the verge of a fourfold cross rip, a PKE surge of incredible, even dangerous proportions.
We just had a visit from the Environmental Protection Agency. How's the grid holding up?
It's not good.
Tell them about the Twinkie. What about the Twinkie?
Growing up in a small town in rural southeastern Tennessee in the 1970s, candidly, had some downsides.
Soul-crushing boredom.
There were limited economic opportunities. The educational system had a lot to be desired when it came to things like textbooks.
All I have is the Bible.
And when it came to cultural fulfillment, about the best we could manage was farm sex.
I never had sex with a farm animal.
Neither did I, but we did watch them have sex with each other. Now, there were good things about life in that small town. There was very little crime.
Oh, yes, I have nothing there really worth stealing.
And the church drama was always first rate as the various factions of church wives connived against one another to establish dominance for prime pew seating. But there was one thing that we had in Etowah, Tennessee, circa 1975, that almost no one else outside southeast Tennessee and northern Georgia had.
Have you tried cakes and pies?
Little Debbie.
Mighty sweet, wholesome treat.
Little Debbie.
Chocolate snack cakes, oatmeal cream, Swiss cake rolls, banana twins. One after another, there's a Little Debbie treat for everybody. Cello wrap for lasting freshness. 12 to a box for only 49 cents.
They're the yummiest.
Little Debbie's are, of course, nationwide now, but they began as a regional snack, and the factory that makes them is located about 30 miles from the place of my birth. So I've been eating Little Debbie's my entire life.
Because you're fat and poor.
Well, that seems a little unfair, but fine, whatever. My family finally did get out of poverty and rural southern living, but in order to do that, I had to give up Little Debbie's for quite some time. We could still get them sporadically in Oklahoma in the early 80s, but when we moved to Guam...
Guam? Really?
They just disappeared entirely. And when we moved to Idaho, they hadn't spread that far west, so I was bereft of Little Debbie goodness for the better part of a decade. No nutty bars, no fudge brownies, no oatmeal cream pie, no fudge rounds, not even a goddamn Swiss cake roll.
Oh, the humanity.
Laugh if you will, but those little plastic wrap confections were one of the few things I had in my young life that could bring comfort in the darkest of times. Be it being mocked by other children because they said I talked like a cast member from Hee Haw.
Gloom, despair, and agony on me. Deep, dark depression, excessive misery. If it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. Gloom, despair, and agony on me.
Or being tormented for being the new chubby ginger kid in class. The one thing that might have made it easier for me then, if I just had a...
Here, have a little Debbie.
And I was denied due to the ignorance of the rest of the country to the delight of a simple Southern snack cake. And there were times during those long dark years that I would have done almost anything to get my hands on just one strawberry shortcake roll or a Star Crunch. Almost anything, because obviously there were lines I wouldn't cross, like committing a hate crime, double murder with possible political motivations, and blaming it on my love of said snack cake. Which brings us to this week's topic, which is not about Little Debbie's at all. But that time in 1978, when a San Francisco politician killed the mayor and a city supervisor, and kinda, sorta tried to blame it on eating Twinkies.
That never happened.
Oh, no, it did, and we're gonna talk about it. But first, we gotta talk about the Twinkie.
Oh, come on, man.
Look, I can't just jump right into a murder. I need to build up to it, and the Twinkie is part of the story. Admittedly, not as big a part as most people think, but still, I have a formula, and I stick to it. The ubiquitous snack cake was created April 6, 1930, at the Continental Baking Company in River Forest, Illinois. Manager James Dewar had a problem.
Erectile dysfunction?
Well, I didn't see anything about that in the research material, so I'm just going to assume he was able to sport wood with the best of them. No, James' issue was that he had an asset that was not producing profit for the bakery.
Capitalism.
But in a fairly innocuous form. You see, the Continental was justly famous for their strawberry shortcakes.
Good morning. Welcome to Strawberry Land. You can't see it. Oh, just a dot on the map. Ah, finest strawberries this side of the rainbow. The personal strawberry patch of Miss Strawberry Shortcake. She lives in a shortcake. Now that sounds like fun. And she tends to a farm through the rain and the sun. That's Custard, her calico cat on the floor. But we'll let them both sleep for just a dream more.
Well, in this case, I'm referring to the strawberry whipped cream and sponge cake-based confection that gave the name to the doll in the cartoon. Early 80s were weird, y'all. The particular problem Dewar had was the strawberries were only in season for a few months during the summer. And this was before the global supply chain shipped them from South America to your local Kroger in the dead of winter in violation of the laws of God and man.
A touch melodramatic.
And so for 9 months out of the year, the pans they used to make said sponge cakes sat unused, taking up space and not generating profit. Then James Dewar had an idea.
Let's invade phones.
Again, no, this was something more prosaic. He decided to make little sponge cakes year-round, then fill them with banana cream, and ask his staff to come up with a name for them.
And they are whispering Dick Cake.
Fortunately, he was convinced this name might not be the marketing angle he was looking for and settled on Twinkies, a name for a brand of shoes he once saw on a billboard, Twinkle Toes Shoes. Honestly, I think I'd have stayed with Dick Cake. The cake sold moderately well until...
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Changed everything. I mean, not only did it plunge the nation into a long and brutal war where millions of people died, it also meant that due to rationing, Twinkies were no longer made with banana cream, but vanilla cream, which actually turned out to be a good thing because people love the vanilla cream way more than they like the banana cream. I mean, does anybody really like banana cream? I name one. And Twinkies would be made with vanilla cream from then on out. The Continental Bakery was bought by Hostess, and then for the next 7 decades, Twinkies would go on to be the snack cake for millions of Americans, finding a place in our hearts, our lunchboxes, our vending machines, and late night stoned off your ass, gotta go get some munchie run. Twinkies were more than just sponge cake and cream. They represented a kind of American exceptionalism. the kind of exceptionalism that celebrated mass-market preservative-filled, nutritiously deficient sugar bomb snack foods that swell the waistlines of America and the stock prices of corporate food conglomerates in equal proportions. The Twinkie was a cultural icon, appearing in song and film and widely rumored to be so filled with potentially toxic crap that it never expired, and in the advent of a nuclear war or a zombie apocalypse, the only food stuff that we would have left for consumption was the little yellow sponge cake filled with vanilla cream that many of us just assumed was actually made out of plastic.
Maybe it will last forever.
Sadly, for the survivors of a nuclear war or a zombie uprising, this is not actually the case. Not only are Twinkies perishable, Twinkie the brand was as well. Hostess, the Twinkie maker, filed for bankruptcy and went out of business in 2012, depriving Americans briefly of Twinkies entirely. Until a hedge fund swooped in, bought the brand, and then sent the product back to market in what truly is a feat of capitalistic marvel in a shittier form than it was before 2012 when they were won by Hostesses. Now they're just a dry yellow dog turd with rock hard filling that is somehow worse than what was already a very, very bad snack.
Oh, groovy, smashing, yay capitalism.
The city of San Francisco was one of the few places in this benighted nation where people who did not conform to the cultural norms of society could find a place to live in something that resembled peace.
Heaven. It was heaven.
Well, that's going further than the reality of the situation, but San Francisco was, in the latter half of the 20th century, considered a safer place for gays, lesbians, and gender non-binary folks to live something that resembled relatively peaceful lives. Quoting from Wikipedia, quote, San Francisco's LBGD culture has its roots in the city's origin as a frontier town. What San Francisco State University Alamilla Boyd characterized as San Francisco's history of sexual promiscuousness and its function as a wide open town, a town where anything goes, unquote. After World War II, the gay culture in the city became gradually more accepted, and after the Stonewall riot in New York City in 1969 and the start of the gay liberation movement, it began to gain considerable political power as well. Politicians began courting a large block of gay voters, and in 1977, San Francisco elected the first openly gay politician, Harvey Milk, possibly the first openly gay politician in U.S. history. Milk was elected to the Board of City Supervisors because San Francisco can't just call it a city council. That would be too normal. This was following Milk using the political clout of the gay community to elect George Moscone as mayor of San Francisco. This might shock you, but having gay people so influential in politics did not please a subset of city voters. Those with a little more, shall we say, conservative bent?
Not even a little.
What happens next gets, shall we say,
complicated.
And the full story is full of twists and turns, and almost no one agrees on the motives for what occurred, and who you believe largely relies on your politics. So I guess you all know where I'm going to land on the belief scale. But I shall try to simplify this as best I can. A fellow by the name of Dan White, native of Northern California, Irish Catholic, the sort of young man who believes in a certain set of values. He volunteered for the Army in 1965 and did a combat tour in Vietnam in the 101st Airborne in 1969. He got out of the Army and began looking for work. He was a security guard in Alaska and then returned to San Francisco, where he joined the police department and then left the police department after
allegedly
beating up a suspect in handcuffs. That would get you in trouble in those days. Today, you get promoted. He then joined the San Francisco Fire Department, where he gained some local fame for the rescue of a woman and her child from the 7th floor of a burning building. And that's the kind of local fame that makes moving into politics a natural choice, and that is what he did. Quoting now from a New York Times article in 1977, quote, Mr. White, who had been elected with strong backing from the firemen's and policemen's unions to get a show and a support from his supervisorial district, a largely white middle-class section that is hostile to the growing homosexual community of San Francisco. As a supervisor, Mr. White made it clear that he saw himself as the board's defender of home, the family, and religious life against homosexuals, pot smokers, and cynics, unquote. In 1977, politics were not as black and white as they are today. White supported some anti-discrimination legislation for gays and lesbians, but he mostly voted against civil rights for them, and especially one that forbade people from discriminating against renting or selling a house to gay and lesbian people. That he wasn't in favor of that. Crazy that people would want to live in a house someplace, but God knows that's going to offend people, and that's bad, at least according to Dan White. Now, I don't know if he was a raging homophobe. According to the information I read, he was friends with Harvey Milk. He invited Harvey Milk to the christening of his first child. But I'm pretty sure that Dan White was definitely not a
Streisand ticket holding friend of Dorothy, know what I'm saying?
And over time, he and Harvey Milk began developing an increasingly tense political relationship that became an intensely tense personal relationship. And this all peaked when White resigned from the Board of Supervisors, ostensibly because the pay was too low for him to raise his family on, which, I gotta be fair, was as true then as it's true now. San Francisco is a fucking expensive place to live even before the tech bros came in and really made it awful. It was also true that Dan White was kind of pissy. The city wanted to put a shelter operated by the Catholic Church, which White was a big fan of, for youths some of whom were drug addicts, others had been convicted of crimes, in White's district. And White lost the battle, so he quit the Board of Supervisors.
Fuck you, I quit.
A few days later, after being lobbied by various conservative factions in the city, White changed his mind and went to Mayor George Moscone and said,
I want my job back, please.
Now, Moscone initially said that White could have his job back, but by the time that White got around to asking for his job back, legally, Moscone couldn't just give it back to him. It had to be vetted by the city lawyers, and when it was, the lawyers were like,
no takebacks.
And also, the liberal members of the board had done some math and realized it would be in their interest for Moscone to appoint someone to the empty seat until the next election, someone that might be more amenable to their policies than Dan White had been. What happened next went down like this, quoting from famoustrials.com. Quote, at 10:15 a.m., an aide arrived at White's house to drive him to City Hall. White carried with him a loaded service revolver and additional shells. After being dropped off in City Hall, White walked around the back entrance and rather than go through the metal detector, entered the building through an open window. He proceeded to Mayor Moscone's office and told the mayor's secretary that he would like to chat with him. After a short wait, the mayor invited White into his office where he told them he would not be reappointed. According to Mr. White's later statement, the mayor told me, it's political decision and that's the end of it. Seeing how distraught White was, Moscone invited him into the back room for a drink, and as the mayor engaged in small talk, White could only think that in a few minutes the mayor would announce the appointment of a new supervisor and lie to the press and tell them that I wasn't a good supervisor and the people didn't want me. Then White would later tell the detective, I just shot him. An autopsy later revealed that the mayor was shot 4 times, twice in the body and twice in the head. White left the mayor's office through a back exit, reloading his gun as he did so. In the hallway, on his way out of City Hall, White saw Supervisor Milk's aide, which, according to White, reminded him that Milk was the most devious board member.
Gay people are evil.
White understood that Milk had worked behind the scenes to deny him his reappointment. White went to confront Milk at his office. When he accused Milk of masterminding the deal to appoint a liberal supervisor in his place, Milk denied that he was involved. Feeling that he wasn't getting any straight answers, White shot Milk 5 times, leaving him dead on his office floor. White ran out of the aide's office and yelled for his car keys. Keys in hand, he dashed out of City Hall and called his wife, Mary Ann, asking her to meet him at St. Mary's Cathedral. After the meeting, White and his wife walked to the police station where he surrendered to the police, unquote. None of this is in any way disputed. White confessed it all to the cops. What was a dispute was how much White's dislike of gay people played into things and what White's state of mind was when he committed the act. Was he sane? Well, we covered all the way that the insanity defense could be used at the time in episode number 444.
That's a plug.
But the trial of Dan White for the murder of Moscone Milk was innovative in finding ways to make what was objectively cold-blooded murder out of revenge and hatred of gay people into something rather less so. It also gave a name to a legal tactic that's been both mocked and employed all the time in court trials.
That's like the Twinkie defense.
Which I am about to explain had really nothing to do with Twinkies, but when you do have a weekly podcast, you grab onto content which has compelling titles and use it whenever you get the goddamn chance. Dan White's attorney, Douglas Schmidt, knew there was no way his client could plead innocent to the charges. What with so many people seeing him walking into the offices, hearing gunshots, and then running out of City Hall like he did. There was also the little matter of Dan White's confession, a confession that cops didn't even need to beat out of him. And we didn't get to beat confession out of a suspect. Most cops are
Very disappointed.
So his lawyer decided to take a different approach. According to an article on the San Francisco Gate.com, quote, the main focus of the defense's case in May 1979 was diminished capacity, that White had suffered from periodic bouts of depression amounting to a major mental illness, that along with the machinations of dirty politics at City Hall, White's co-counsel Stephen Scher said in a recent interview, drove him around the bend, unquote. FamousTrials.com gives more detail, quote, on May 1st, 1979, with his client seated at a table behind a bulletproof plastic wall, Doug Schmidt told jurors in his opening statement, good people, fine people with fine backgrounds, simply don't kill in cold blood. It just doesn't happen, and obviously some part of him has not been presented thus far. Schmidt suggested that the evidence would show his client to have undergone a vile biochemical change that pushed him over the edge into violence. He said White was supremely frustrated with the crime and the politics of the city, and that he saw the city deteriorating as a place for the average, decent people to live, unquote. The defense argument was that Dan White was in a bit of a funk. Things hadn't been going well for him.
He's been under a lot of stress.
You see, Dan was just a good dude, but lately things had been adding up. He was having some trouble making ends meet, and some shit on the job had been piling up. And frankly, his coworkers were not at all team players, and his boss wasn't receptive to his input, which drove him to quit his job out of frustration. Then, after his boss had said he could have his job back, legal department told them it wasn't so simple, and worse than that, the replacement they were going to hire to fill his spot was a flunky for the boss. And you know what?
Just snapped.
And killed a couple of people. A little. How do you make such an argument in court? Well, you hire experts. In this case, a bevy of psychiatrists who will claim whatever it is you want them to claim, so long as your check's clear. During the trial, it was one of said shrinks that testified in the ways that you could tell Dan White wasn't doing all that well, and I swear I'm not making this up, because he had been eating a lot of junk food. Martin Bender, one of the 5 shrinks hired by the defense, testified according to FamousTrials.com, quote, Dr. Martin Bender had said White might have been thrown off kilter by gorging himself on Twinkies. According to Bender, research suggests that junk food binging potentially can adversely affect mental states. There's a substantial body of evidence that in susceptible individuals, large quantities of what we call junk food, high sugar content food with lots of preservatives, can precipitate antisocial and even violent behavior. There have been some studies, for example, where they have taken so-called career criminals and taken them off junk food and put them on milk and meat potatoes, and their criminal records immediately evaporate, unquote.
Get the fuck out of here with that shit.
Okay.
The press watching the trial heard this and instantly dubbed this novel legal approach the Twinkie Defense, and wrote stories in the paper claiming that White was blaming the sponge cake and cream snack for his brutal murder of 2 human beings. This has infuriated the defense team ever since. The article in the SF Gate I've been quoting from is from the 25th anniversary, and the lawyer then was still pissed. Quote, I don't think Twinkies were ever mentioned in the testimony, said Chief Defense Attorney Douglas Schmidt, who recalls ho-hos and ding-dongs, but no Twinkies. Well, of course, they didn't use ho-hos or ding-dongs, because if they did, that would make people think of
dick cake.
In fact, the cream-filled confections were mentioned only in passing. Junk food was an insignificant part of the defense. The matter was raised briefly in testimony by Martin Blender, one of 5 defense therapists, and today the entire episode is characterized by Schmidt as a throwaway witness with a throwaway line. Wonder how Martin Blender feels about that. Well, I'll tell you. Today, a still angry Blender says it's preposterous to think the 12 middle-class homeowner jurors would give a killer even a partial pass on the basis of what he ate the night before. He blames the press for perpetuating the myth. Unquote. Martin, Doug, it was more than a passing reference. If you read the trial transcripts, y'all brought that shit up. And I, for one, don't really understand.
Why are you so mad?
Because that shit worked. Oh, maybe not the Twinkie defense, but the whole diminished capacity bullshit for the crime of premeditated double murder, and it was so premeditated. Dude went home, got his gun, extra bullets, had his boy drive him to City Hall, entered the building in such ways to avoid the metal detector, orchestrated an excuse to be alone in Moscone, and then hunted down Milk and executed. And for all of this, Dan White was found guilty of voluntary manslaughter. Voluntary manslaughter. And sentenced to 7 years, of which he served 3.
Oh, come on, man.
As you can imagine, this did not set well with the kind of people who felt as though maybe Dan White killed Moscone and Milk because, he thought that the gays were
Disturbed. Icky.
They were not at all pleased, according to the San Francisco Weekly. Quote, the punishment so poorly matched the brutal killings that most San Franciscans believed White got away with murder. Public outrage over the verdicts ignited the violent White Night riots, which caused millions of dollars in property damage to city property, unquote. And as I mentioned earlier, how much homophobia played in the murders of Milk and Moscone were and are hotly debated. Ray Sloan, White's business partner and political advisor, maintained that gayness had nothing to do with it, that what happened was White's anger at personal and policy disputes. Sloan said in the SF Weekly article, quote, Sloan, who is gay, says no aspect of White crimes could be put in a positive light, but he believes White has frequently been falsely portrayed. In the book Gay Slayer by Warren Hinkle, the play Execution of Justice by Emily Mann, which was made into a 1999 television movie, and in countless newspaper and magazine stories, White has been characterized as a religious zealot, a homophobe, and a hired assassin for the San Francisco Police Department, the Catholic Church, or both. These characterizations are ridiculous, Sloan says. But the one he believes most is unfair is that Dan White killed Harvey Milk because of his homosexuality, unquote. And you know what? That might be true. I cannot claim to know the motivations of a man who committed suicide a year after he was released from prison. It's entirely possible he was dealing with PTSD from his time in Vietnam or had a genuine mental health issue that predated his time in the service. But what's abundantly clear is that Dan White knew what he was fucking doing when he committed the crime. He told the detective who investigated the case after he was released that he intended to murder 2 more people that day, but just ran out of time. The claim of diminished capacity was clearly good lawyering, but total bullshit. And the Twinkie defense is, in fact, largely a creation of the media. But I will tell you this, pod friends. The jury debated for 36 hours. Now, details of jury composition are sketchy in the sources I have available. I know that it was both men and women, and I have to assume that any defense team that could dream up the Twinkie defense, which again, not about Twinkies, could and would use their peremptory strikes calculatingly to eliminate anyone that they thought might even be a little...
That's a little gay.
And based on firsthand knowledge of the absolute terror straight white America held the gay community in at the time, I'll go out on a limb here and say that Harvey Milk being gay and George Moscone being a little too friendly with the gays might have influenced them.
Yes, I bet.
So it's not improbable that when provided with the reason, however thin, to be more lenient than they would against a defendant who was, say, not one of them, which Dan White certainly was, they would be, and shall we say, somewhat amenable to the idea that maybe he had a good reason for it. I could tell you stories about the gay panic defenses where murderers were exonerated for their murders because they were scared they might catch the gay from the people they murdered, and so...
I had to kill him.
And the contemporary events tell us that even a politically motivated crime, like, say, I don't know, trying to overthrow the government, can be forgiven by a sympathetic jury who view the defendants as on their side of an issue. There is zero question in this podcaster's mind that the white jury wanted to acquit him because they didn't like gay people. And when offered an easy out on a flimsy pretext, they happily took it. Whatever Dan White's motivations were when he killed Harvey Milk and Joseph Moscone, the jury did what they did because Harvey Milk was gay and George Moscone was probably gay too because he didn't hate the gays like they did. But I tell you what, all of that being said, if I am ever on trial for murder, I want a lawyer with a big enough balls to say that I did it because...
partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, polysorbate 80, and yellow dye number 5.
Made me do it, and with a silver enough tongue to get a jury to go along with the idea.
This episode is brought to you by Greenlight. Get this. Adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Spotify. Greenlight.com/Spotify.
This episode is brought to you by MeUndies. Underwear drawers are like the Wild West.
You never know what you're going to pull out or what shape it's in. So upgrade your collection with the buttery soft comfort of MeUndies. MeUndies' signature fabric is as soft as a warm hug from your favorite sweater. Plus, it's breathable and oh so comfy, making it ideal for all-day wear. Get 20% off your first order, plus free shipping at MeUndies.com/Spotify with code Spotify. That's MeUndies.com/Spotify, code Spotify.
That is it for the show this week. I told you last week I would bring the downer to the pod after all that gooey positivity we had. And next week I plan on bringing the snark in yet another legal case people widely misunderstand. So rate and review us wherever you get your pods. That way people can find us and get the kind of legal advice they cannot get from other podcasts with, like, say, actual lawyers and shit. Donate to our legal defense fund. Okay, we just actually use that money to buy Little Debbie's at patreon.com/whatthehellpodcast. Do all the things Jeremy tells you to do in the closing credits, otherwise he will get very cranky with you, and you don't want him to do that, and we'll need to give him a Twinkie to calm him down. And so for me, Dave, I open that door so slowly, take a peek north and south, then I pull out a Hostess Twinkie and I pop it in my mouth. Bledsoe, and producer,
Trust me, he never needs anything healthy. Don't let this song lie to you.
Gavin, and all the fictional junk food junkies on the show. We want to say, I'm a junk food junkie. Good Lord, have pity on me. But I ain't never killed anyone because of it. And we'll see you all next week.
I take out my strong box that I keep under lock and key, and I take it off to my closet where nobody else can see. I open that door so slowly, take a peek up north and south. Then I pull out a Hostess Twinkie and I pop it in my mouth. Yeah, in the daytime I'm Mr. Natural, just as healthy as I can be. But at night I'm a junk food junkie. Good Lord, have pity on me.
What the Hell Were You Thinking stars Dave Bledsoe and features Gavin St. James and several fictional minions. The show is produced by Kimberly Steele and a part of the Seltzer Kings podcast network. You can find more information on the show on their website, whatthehellpodcast.com, or on Twitter at @thehell_podcast, or on Facebook as What the Hell Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I have no ending for this, so I take a small bow.
Coffee's a little hot.
Seltzer Kings
Podcasts.